So let's get rolling on that. All right. Welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from women in digital with power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan, and I am the owner and chief empowerment officer of Together Digital. We are a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital, who choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can learn more about us at togetherindigital.com. This week, I am here to introduce all of you to Erica Ballard. This is Erica. Wave Erica. Hello for all of our live audience that's listening with us today. Erica is a woman who jumped from job to job, hoping to find the company that let her be herself while doing work that mattered. She never quite found that place, which is why she left the corporate world to start a business to change that for women. In addition to to retain her, which is her business, Erica runs a successful life and career coaching practice. Prior to working for herself, Erica spent 10 years in the public health sector. She has an MS from Tufts University School of Medicine and got her BA in journalism from Indiana University. While a Hoosier at heart, Erica currently lives in Denver with her husband and her daughter and pup. Erica, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Right. Awesome. So I want to give everybody a little bit of background about how you ended up here with us today. And it happened through LinkedIn, ended up being a very popular post on LinkedIn. And I think, here, I'm just going to I'm going to give you all the gist of it by reading a little bit of it to you. So imagine like you're scrolling through LinkedIn in your kind of business day mindset, and you come across a picture of this bright-eyed, beautiful baby girl. And right above it reads, she woke me up every hour on the hour, every fucking hour. By 4 a.m., I was ready to leave and never come back. Now, I know a lot of you listening today are moms. And one thing, Erica, I have to say is I don't know a mom who's never had that thought. And if you had that thought, we understand. If you haven't, good for you. Because it felt too hard. The idea of getting up and taking care of her and going to work felt too damn hard, which might make me sound like a bad mom. But you know what? Every mom I know can relate to what I just said, right? Because the truth is our kids require a lot from us. And even though we love the shit out of them, sometimes it's really, really, really hard to be a mom, especially one that works. After a few employers acknowledge this truth, yet few employers acknowledge this truth, in part because we hide it so well. We all got told on by Erica on LinkedIn. And then we all got kind of like baited with this beautiful little baby. And then she's like, here, boom, truth. And so like, I was just one of so many that, replied and commented on this because you were telling some real truths and having some real talk in what is usually a very kind of business, place such as LinkedIn. So it was just hard not to bring you into the group to introduce you to them because, as a leader of a women's organization of very professional, very ambitious, very focused women, I see a lot of this struggle and this tension and duality of working motherhood. You become more efficient than you've ever been in your life. And yet you are diminished when you go to work because now you're a mom and you have other priorities. So, so much to unpack, so much to talk about here. I want to get to our questions because it just felt right, Erica. First of all, thank you for making that post. Thank you for sharing your truth and the truth of so many others. It's not always easy. All right. So when I was reading the post, so many of us felt this in our bones. If you happen to go back and read the post, I know I was one of them. However, it isn't always sunshine. It wasn't always sunshine and roses all around in the response. I was curious in the, I don't know, what did you get? Like 4,000 comments? What surprised you? What delighted you? And what disappointed you about the response you received to this post?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the positives because it's very easy for me to go to the negatives. So I really appreciated the continued storytelling. So once I was able to, once I opened up, right, it was a lot of women speaking their truth, letting it be known, talking about how difficult it was, and how wonderful. Because I think that's the thing that is hard to describe about motherhood. It's like, it's hard and it's awesome.
Right.
Always together. Right. And so I really appreciated that. And I was also surprised, honestly, like having my main platform for a long time had been on Instagram because I was a coach. And like when I started my entrepreneurial journey. So I was used to sharing.
Mhm.
So I was really shocked at truly surprised and delighted, to use your language, the response from moms too, because this was somewhat normal conversation for me with my girlfriends. Like I would be like, hi, I'm dying. Like I'm dying inside, but like, what's going on? What's happening? And it was always, not a rescue, but like space held or whatever needed to be. And I was surprised at how big the response was, because it made it really clear to me how much we do hide. I knew we did, but like watching the outpour of conversation was, and like the thanks for the vulnerability and things like that, all grateful and heard and taken in. But I was surprised by that. The thing that really, there's two things I wouldn't say shook me. One thing was like, okay, it was a lot of like me tooing with dads. And it's not that dads don't deserve support, recognition, etc. But this was a post about my experience. I didn't expect it to go viral. I was just writing about my experience and the amount of men who were like, hello, you didn't mention me. I'm like, yeah, I know. It was about me. Like it was about my life as a mom.
Right.
So
Right.
that was, it did start to though help me understand, not that like those men wanted to be spotlighted, although some of them did, is there is a lack of conversation around dads. And if there is a conversation, it's like celebratory, like, oh my God, he went to the pediatrician with her. Good job, mom. You suck because you didn't go, but he's amazing because he went. And so it was that conversation and dads wanting to be more dads. And then the really disappointing part was like, I mean, I know sexism is rampant and I'm used to having it on like in a face-to-face way, but like I got some mean messages like, you're an idiot, like, sorry, you're so stupid about picking your partner. Like, you're like, yeah. Cause I was like, no, I'm a breastfeeding mom. Like,
right. Like he doesn't got those.
Yeah. I was like,
I need to be conscious for this to happen.
Right. And so, and my partner's great. Like nowhere in my message did I say my partner was a terrible human being who I hated. I was just saying I'm tired. And I mean, vitriol. And then like people also come how like you cussing takes away from the message. I'm like, then don't read it. like you could have stopped like at the F word. Like it was asterisk for the record, but like you could have stopped. You could have just
I said the word, but you did asterisk.
Yeah. I was like, you could have just moved on. But there was a lot of anger from men. That was shot like, it's your fault. You're a problem. How dare you say this? You're not saying it professionally enough. You're not doing it. And I was like, my husband said this before. He's always like, why is it always like the white guy that's got a comment? And I'm like, I don't know, white husband. Like, what is it like? Why is it always the white guy that's got a comment? And like, I mean, I do have some thoughts on that, but yeah. So that was the piece. Is like I love the conversation continues. I love how open the conversation continues to be. I was surprised at how little that conversation was actually happening, given that 70% of moms in the workforce are, or 70% of women in the workforce are moms. Like we're not having this conversation at peace. And then this this dads wanting to be seen, and then the anger certain men have by essentially telling the truth and like rocking the patriarchal foundation in which work and life and all that exists.
Like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of it too is just inadequacy. We have a working moms group, and there's just certain things that get thrown around a lot of times that I don't necessarily give perspective on or have perspective on or even think much about, because I do feel I have a fantastic partner. But then I hear about other things, and it's funny, the stuff that we have to kind of work through at home, but then in public too, when we choose to be vulnerable with these kinds of things. And I think when people react in that way, they're just showing in equal measure their own vulnerability. I think dads often, don't a lot of times moms, we talked about this in the moms group, how sometimes we kind of hoard the doing and the power in the household, because we feel like that's what we were born and raised to do. And that's like, in some ways, our own internalized patriarchy. And by actually just like my husband, he's so good about this. I will be like, oh, thanks for emptying the dishwasher. He goes, you don't need to thank me. Nobody thanks me for emptying the dishwasher 3 times a day and reloading it,
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, I think I was just kind of curious to ask that. I'm not a big reader of comments when it comes to things on social media. So honestly, I didn't even read much of them. I was like, I'm just going to have Erica talk about them because it's so triggering and it's so infuriating. But I think it also just shows, at least to me, how brave you were to just utter those truths that, a good portion of the working population, moms and dads, are facing and dealing with. And maybe if moms can talk a little more openly, then dads can talk a little bit more about it openly too.
That's the thing that I continue to see. I mean, it's all over the literature. It's all over studies. Like when life improves for women, it improves for everybody. Like that is just so clear in the data. And that's why I have such a focus on moms, is because I know that improving the life of women improves it for everybody.
Yes.
And I do think that women face these own unique challenges, all that you've mentioned. Like we are judged more heavily. Like we have internalized patriarchy. Like thousands of years, we were groomed to be moms and wives. And so when we have all of these limiting beliefs, yes, there's some of them are limiting beliefs, but most of them are conditioning. And that's the conversation I want to have more. It's like, not, hey, you're failing as an individual. It's like you have been conditioned to act this certain way and you're thinking it's a moral failing on your part, when really society for the past thousands of years have said, show up this way, do it this way, or we will judge you, discard you, burn you, like all of these things.
Yes, clearly. Oh, the mom guilt is real. All right. Research shows that this year, April of this year, women hold 23% of executive positions. 23, so still not a quarter of executive positions. 29% senior management positions. 37% of manager positions. 42% of professional, and 47% of support staff. Without many women at the top, not that you all needed those numbers to believe that, we just like the numbers and the data. What is the trickle down effect on policy and culture that we're not acknowledging?
Here's my reply is, when I think about all of those numbers, like it's clear to me that all policies, procedures, programming, all of that is for men, or at least the default is created for men, all of these things, because nothing is gender neutral or female forward unless work has been done to deconstruct it. And that's where we get in trouble, is like all of this stuff continues or perpetuates the myth as men as the ideal workers. And then what ends up happening is that when we want, God forbid, paid maternity leave, right, to create the workers for tomorrow and continue the economy going, or we want stipends or for childcare, or we want paid family leave, when we want that, it looks like accommodations. So it looks like, oh, we're accommodating her, versus this is what a woman, a mother, needs to succeed in the workplace. And that's the issue that I see, is like when we have it look the way that you've just described, right? We default to men as the ideal worker because of all the conditioning, right? Like we got conditioning and so did they. All of that conditioning, which then means when we ask for things that are like basic human, rights and truly, because everywhere else, right, a lot of this stuff exists, is it looks like accommodations. And there's something, I just had this conversation yesterday, so I'm going to bring it up. What I think is so interesting as I think through all of this is that almost everyone in the C-suite who's a man is a dad.
Right.
Like my question is, where is that? Like what has been missed? I know I have some answers for that, but like that to me continues to be the most interesting piece, is like, but you're a dad.
Right.
So help me understand how it's so hard for you to understand what is difficult or what support I need to succeed. And it goes back to like women not having the full conversation, even with their partners at home.
Yes.
But that, like, because that continues to blow my mind. I'm like, we look like accommodations, and yet we have a man who the only reason he's there is because 9 times out of 10 his wife stayed at home. Like, so don't you know? Don't you know? Can't you see? But it's they forget all of it. They forget all of it.
They forget all of it. And then again, I think it's, I try to look at the bigger picture of society and the systems like we're talking about here. And it's just as much a barrier for men as it is for women, that men don't even see child rearing as something that's a responsibility of theirs. It would always set me on fire when one of the guys I worked with was like, I got to go home and babysit my kids. I can't stay late tonight. I'm like, it's not babysitting, and I agree. I think, just sitting in a lot of kind of peer groups and just talking very openly and honestly with moms, you made a great point, not being honest with our partners about our anxiety, our depression, our like physical, mental, emotional changes, the struggles, the way that like, if you don't give them purview to that, if you don't make them privy to that, it's really unfair to have them understand and step in and expect when, where, and how they can possibly help if they're a partner that's going to meet you halfway. So yeah, I was definitely, it's funny, it's stupid stuff like my mom when she was younger would always tell me, you're going to get older and you're going to grow chin hairs. Never pluck your chin hairs in front of your husband. I was like, screw that. I'm kind of coming at this one. There's just something, if you love me and you're here for me, you're here for all of this. And then if you're not, I mean, that's going to prove apparent in the way that you decide to show back up. So yeah, I do think, and I think it's interesting. The other thing I'll point out that I really love that you said was accommodations versus necessities. For those of you who are listening to this and know that your workplace does not provide adequate parental leave, and that has either stopped you from moving forward with family planning or has impeded your health, your family, and things like that, like it's a mindset shift when you're talking about these things and you're asking about these things at your current employer or potential employer. Just think about it. It's not an accommodation. It's a necessity. It's just a matter of fact.
And it's the return on investment is so huge. Like, not only is it a necessity, but if we were to even put that aside, like if we were to put basic human dignity aside, like it is an ROI. Because when you pay for a woman's maternity leave, and in America, like we're happy with 3 or 4 months. Like we're not even saying like, give me 6. Like if you give 3 or 4 months of salary, like it still costs less. It still costs less than to go find a new person, replace them, etc. And when you support a woman, and like this is like managers just checking in, making sure everything's okay, like allowing for the ramp up that's necessary, the likelihood she comes back and stays, I mean, the loyalty that a mom will bring is like nothing I've ever seen. Maven Clinic has reports on like how supportive, like what it looks like when employers are supportive and their women's loyalty to it. I think it's like 80 to 90% of women will stay at that company for at least a year after like they have a baby, if you provide them what they need to thrive. Like women don't, like this is the thing, moms don't want to look for another job.
No, hold on.
Now I have 2. Like I don't want to look for a third, but if you're going to force my hand, I'm going to do it because my kid is actually more important than my job. But you know what? The thing that employers forget is that we learn that after becoming a mom. Like we were so myself included, like we become so career driven that we forget that like we have a life outside of it because of all of the conditioning around achievement, accomplishment, etc. That when we have a kid, it's like, oh, there's more. Right. And I'm going to live that more. But that doesn't mean, like, the thing that keeps getting me is like, just because I want to go to I'm in California right now, just because I want to go to California and go on hang out on the beach with my kid doesn't mean I'm less committed to my job. Like I'm allowed to be committed to multiple things. I mean, I got married, right? I had and I'm committed to him. I'm still committed to like my first quote unquote family. And I was able to be committed to my job, but it's like, as soon as we become a mom, people are all of a sudden think, she can't have multiple parts of her personality. She can only have one. Right. So forget about everything else. It's so like when it's said out loud, it sounds so stupid. And most men who hear it are like, yeah, that's real dumb. But because of their position of privilege, they don't ever have to think about this. No. And when you call it out, they get really uncomfortable. And that, I think, is the challenge for women is and it's not balancing it, but like the people who can make the changes, including women at times, feel so triggered when you share this type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's understandable. I think that leads nicely into one of our next questions. I was like debating which one we go to because you kind of touched on both. So not to disparage dads at all, but you talked about the perception of a woman once she becomes a mom in the workplace. What are some other challenges or stigmas that moms in particular face in the workplace that often go unacknowledged?
The big two, they all stem from this, is commitment and competence. So it's called the maternal wall bias, and it's the bias that women get after they have kids, and it essentially says that once you have kids, you're less committed and thus less competent at your job. And everything stems from that. I mean, the numbers are staggering. Like, what is it? 79% of moms, if you're a mom, you're 79% less likely to get hired, 100% less likely to be promoted, and you make on average $11,000 less than dads and your childless peers. I mean, it's insane, right? Of what that looks like, but it is both internalized, like we internalize it, right, by not speaking to it, and then we also get it reinforced by when we do speak to it, right? It like we often get hit by it. I was just interviewing someone. She had 7 miscarriages, y'all. 7.
Mm-hmm.
6 in her job before she got pregnant. And when she would speak to it and she would become a little harder, like she would tell you she'd keep being a little harder. Mm-hmm. No one was ever like, I wonder if this impacted you. They were just like, keep working, figure it out, right? Because we're these robots. And so that's the piece, is like at work, we want people to be robots. We want to pretend that they're not, they don't have a life outside of it. And that's why men are so celebrated, is because they are seen as potential robots because they have someone else to take care of them. And so when we think about moms and the bias against them, it all stems from what I said, is the competency and the commitment. And what it shows up as is phrases that we don't even know are happening, right? So it's managers saying things like, Robin would be great for that project, but she's a little one at home and it involves travel, so we probably just shouldn't put her up for it. Or like,
so true.
Or like, Kristen would be great at the managerial role, but her hands are tied with that. Like, now that she has 3 kids, so maybe not now. And it's all of that over and over and over again, all these back conversations, and the people in them not recognize, like, it looks benevolent. It looks like it's being helpful. It looks like they're on our team. And that's why it's so difficult to see. And so that's the first piece. And the other piece, when it comes to kids, I think that we get held back on, that happens all the time, but no one knows, is if I'm late to a meeting, Lord help me, it must be Isabel's fault. There's no way that like I would be late to a meeting because I had to pee, God forbid, or I wanted to eat, or I wanted to take a break in between my meetings, or I wanted to like get right. Like, it always is my daughter. But like, if Nick's late to a meeting, no one cares. No one says anything. Like, we're automatically blamed for, like, I guess the right way to put it is we're penalized for not being perfect. So that's the other piece. Like, they call it it's called the prove it again bias, where it's like, you're penalized by not being excellent.
Right.
And I mean, and it's like, this is hard for like women and I'm a white passing women, but man, women of color, it's even worse. It's like, you must be excellent. You must be perfect. Anytime you're not, because you're a mom, you're what's it called? Your duties or your allegiance is split. And obviously it's one or the other. It's just assumed. And I think this is always happening.
Yeah.
Every place that we go, and we don't see it because it goes back to the systems piece you're talking about. It's so internalized. Yes. And oftentimes it sounds so sweet, and we're like, it's like we're almost letting moms off the hook to go home. Like, see, so it's like preparing for the shoe to drop. Right. And I think we're doing it as a way to like help them and help ourselves should they have to leave. But like, it's only hurting people. Thinking of them in the negative is only hurting them.
Yeah. That's so true. And isn't it any wonder we're so tired? So it's like, you're already being sleep deprived, but then you have to do the whole prove it again. I'm kind of curious too. I anecdotally, I had read this and heard this But I don't know if you know of any numbers, and if you don't off the top of your head, totally fine. But dads, when it comes to men becoming dads, I have heard and anecdotally read and seen men get promotions because now they have another kid to support. Is that relevant? And does that prove itself out in the numbers, I guess?
It does. It does. So when a dad, literally, like, I think this was 5 years ago, a friend of mine was trying to get promoted. Oh no, she was trying to get a raise. And she's a single mom, but they didn't know that. And they were like, no, we can't give you that because you already have a husband. Like you already, yeah, like you already have someone, like you have, because you have a husband. And she's like getting divorced. You know, she didn't want to air that dirty laundry, but it was like, because I have a second income, you're saying that I should take less. Like it is, because they assume, because the flip side, right, is they assume that men are making more. I mean, it's called it's the fatherhood bonus, right? So they make more money, they get promoted more easily, and they're seen as genuinely now more likable. Now that they're a dad, like now that they have this like other like fun hobby, right? That they can like relate with women a little bit more with, and like they can like communicate and like now move through crowd more easily. Like this is great. And I just sit there and I'm like, fuck y'all. Like that's insane. And the thing though, I will say to the dad component of it is like, I do feel bad for dads now in this world, particularly like the millennial and below generation, because the vast majority of them, the one thing I will say is that they want to be different.
Yeah.
They want to be sensitive. They want to be with their kids. They want all this. But just like the motherhood benefit, like bonus, there is a tipping point for dads. When dads get too involved, then their masculinity gets questioned. And once their masculinity is questioned, then moving up becomes even harder. I mean, it's this tightrope that we're all walking because someone said at some point, and listen, I don't mean to minimize the conditioning, but it's like, we are all adherent to old ways of being because we keep saying, if we could just follow suit now, we'll get to the top and we'll change it. But so little of us get to the top, and so little of us, when we get to the top, actually change it.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I remember I was out for a lunch with someone in a company that I worked at that was in HR, because I think, like you were saying, these things perpetuate themselves even beyond just the men in the room. So she was in HR, and I remember this was before I even had kids. We were walking back from lunch, and she's like, I just hate it when people use their kids as an excuse to not do their work. And I was like, hold the phone, honey. I'm like, one, you're in HR. Two, we're both women and capable of bearing children, I assume. And I was just like, my mind kind of just exploded. And to be honest, I was still in that phase that you were describing earlier in my career, where I was like very career driven, very ambitious. I was there from 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. I was on every big important project. There's a lot to be said. And I don't know how many, non-moms we have listening, but I do wonder, because we end up having a lot of like to-be moms within our mom peer group that we host. It's hard to explain, but I wanted to pose the question to you because you spend so much time in this space. Pretend I have a time machine and we're going to go back to pre-COVID, PreKid Era, Erica. Right? I know, like, what was that? What was that like? If you can dig back that far, right? What advice might have you given yourself? Because I also want to make us aware of the ways in which other women aren't supporting other women who are going through these things like miscarriages, family planning, not being a mom and being penalized by having more work, being penalized for being a mom and having 2 jobs. Is there any kind of advice that you'd have given yourself looking back?
The advice that I would give myself sooner would be to let people be. I mean, all of this work I find in gender equity, anti-racism, undefining masculinity, LGBTQ plus work, like all extremely important. And it's all because like, let me be me. And I wish that I had space to understand that that's really what we're trying to get to, because that would allow me to have harder conversations. Like when I was doing the 8 to 7 nights, when I had a very he wasn't homophobic, but he was like misogynistic. He would never call himself racist, but I'll call him racist. And he, he would say comments, but I was like, I just got to get to the top. I just got to move up. I just got to move up. So I would just shut up. Now I don't shut up. Now I won't say that I hold questions. I'll pose questions. Like, what do you mean? Why would you say that? Don't you know about this? What do you think? Like, I wish that I knew that people were allowed to be themselves and they were allowed to live their life how they wanted to live their life. And that it was my job to help enable that. And so if I heard something, I could get curious and or stand up depending. I will tell you, Erica back then kind of knew that, but she was angry. And so like, either she would say nothing, be like, I'm going to get to the top and then I'm going to change all this. Or I'd be like, I'd let it all bottle up. And it was an explosion of like, fuck you, you racist prick. Or like, why do you talk to women like that? Why, like, how dare you? And I would just lose it. And I think anger is a very valuable emotion. But because I bottled it instead of said something, it didn't allow me to do the work necessary. And the other piece too, and I do think I started to do a pretty good job of this, which has allowed motherhood, no matter how tired it is, to show up, is like, I did the internal work. Because look, I think the bigger conversation really needs to start to be around systems, because we put so much on women themselves to fix themselves. But like, all that being said, is doing the inner work and deconstructing my own reality to reconstruct how I want it to be, so that when I see people, even if I disagree with them, I don't have to come through with anger, or I've already decided how I wanted to be a mom, recognizing that I'm allowed to shift, right? So instead of like constructed that image, I was like, hey, you know how to give yourself grace. Hey, you know how to like let yourself feel emotions. Hey, you already know the type of person you want to be. So I wish I would have done a little bit more work around that in the beginning. I think I did a decent job, but I wish I would have started all of that earlier, because it is, there's an identity crisis, right? When you become a mom, just if you're a career woman and very career driven, like your identity was tied up in so many things, and either you're adding this on or this thing is imploding everything you thought you were.
100%. So much good stuff. I like that advice. You can't do for others what you can't do for yourself. If you're not doing the internal work and you're not showing yourself some grace and understanding for showing up and being who you are, then you can't do that for others. And I see that a lot, even among just women. And that's honestly in the last year where I've spent a lot of my time and focus, is helping women collaborate versus compete, because there's already so many things stacked up against us. It's like the last thing we need is each other up against us. And I think, that's one thing too, where it's like, I hear and see a lot of working moms struggle with wanting to even bring up the fact that they are struggling between home and work, or what are the challenges between home and work, because one, they have to keep this facade that life is Instagram perfect. But then two, it's just like one of those things. It's like, well, if I show that vulnerability, what's that going to do? And then in the meantime, the women who aren't having children yet are like, what the hell? I got to pick up the slack for all these moms that got to go home and do daycare pickup. And then it becomes this us versus them, which is just not helpful at all. It's not helpful at all.
The thing about that, so the thing that really drives me nuts about that, there's two things. One, it always says like women are the worst against women. And I don't believe that at all. I think there are some women who are not nice to other women, but it's more so that they're resentful or they don't like themselves. So I hate that. And then the other piece of it that I think everyone forgets, as when we put stay-at-home moms versus working moms versus women at work who doesn't have kids versus women who does, is that's how the patriarchy continues, by pitting us against ourselves. Right? The patriarchy does its work in silence, because what then ends up happening is, instead of us pulling back and saying, man, if we all collectively, or even if a handful of us said, no more, I demand a bigger table, or I want this to look differently, or I'm going to walk out, like they did in Iceland, where all the moms one day were like, bye. And it is the most, like, as close to gender neutral as a country as you can get, because one day they just said, F it. Like, you guys think this is easy? You take the childcare, you do the work, we're out of here. Like, if we started to understand the power within us and that like everything that's coming against us is so that the systems stay the way that they are, man, things would change, which is why I hate when women judge other women, because I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, I understand why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Like, that was annoying for sure. And we're perpetuating the systems that we're all trying to break, because even those women without kids, right? They don't like the patriarchy for the most part either. And the one thing I will say, just I think is important, is those women without kids too, especially when moms are like sometimes to them back, because that's what we sound like in my head when we're like bad mouthing, is you don't know their story. They could have been on their sixth miscarriage, and they're not resentful at you. They're resentful at the fact that like the thing that they want most in their life, you have.
Yeah.
And I think that like that's where it goes back to like understanding, questioning, like holding space, recognizing that people are just projecting, like, because there's so many things that happen to us as humans, and when we go to work, we feel we need to hide it all. And I get it to some extent, but because we don't need to be sharing all of our dirty laundry at work, but also the individual changes the collective. So when you start to show up as your true self, like the self that you can bring to work, right? And sharing some of these things, like, you will shift minds and hearts. It's just the question then becomes, will I shift it here while I'm here?
Right.
Or will I shift it in a different space? And, you know, some of us have the privilege to move to other jobs, and some of us don't right away. And I think that that's the interesting thing I think I see in this world, is like we want, like, I'm an advocate, and I think we can all be an advocate, but it's going to look different for everyone depending on the type of role they have, the type of support they have at home, how much money they have, how much money they're making, and so forth.
100%. How you show up for yourself, how you show up for others. It seems like such a small thing to do, but honestly, I think if you start to look at the course of your day and the way you interact with people at work, the things that you choose to hold back on and maybe not open up and share, you know, I've always just kind of looked at it as not a disservice, but just you're not really helping others. Like, I think there's something to becoming a parent that you cannot say that it doesn't broaden your horizons. It doesn't increase your abilities to be efficient and multitask, in case you were already great at that before. There's so much that becoming a parent can bring that adds value in the way that you show up as a human, the way you manage, the way you work, the way you communicate. That it's really unfortunate that we don't honor and see in our culture and society all that becoming or working through the difficulties, even sometimes of becoming a mom, can do to a person to make them stronger and better, more empathetic, and these things. I want to kind of skip ahead just one question, and then we'll go back to kind of focusing on the companies, because we are still talking a bit about our working moms. What advice would you give working moms and or parents out there who about how to communicate with their employer about their needs as they reach this life stage? Because I've straight up heard women say, I am terrified to tell my employer I'm pregnant.
I know. It sucks. It's so
and
unfortunate.
They don't want to put pictures of their kids on their desk because that might look bad. I've literally heard women say that, and it breaks my heart every time.
Yeah, I heard it yesterday. For me, it goes back to getting. Can you hear my daughter? She just woke up. She woke up, you guys. She woke up at 4 a.m. in the morning, and was popped up wide awake. Hello, I'm here. And then she took a nap, and now she's all off the schedule. And my poor husband, I'm like listening to like her articulate her needs in a language that we can't understand.
Right.
So to answer your question, to go back, I'm just like, oh, that poor girl. Is recognizing that I really wish systems were better. I find that when you can get right with yourself, it's a different energy that you show up with. So for me, like back in the day, I was angry. I was angry. And I couldn't find partners or champions or any of that, because I was always just bulldozing, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But while it worked at the company standpoint, it never really worked for me, because I was tired. I was even more tired. I was even more angry. I was numbing. I was just doing all the things that I think y'all can recognize what a 25 to 30-year-old would do when they don't feel like feeling their feelings and they feel like they're justified and right. So I would say to get right with yourself, it's like, okay, so pregnancy example, get excited about being pregnant. Like, what do you really want to feel about being pregnant? If you want to feel excited, if you want to feel joyful, then you have to embrace that. And if you show up and your employer isn't, and you have the opportunity to leave for a different company, do it. Because there are companies that will hire pregnant ladies. I see it. Like, even though it feels like it doesn't happen, I'm telling you, I see it all the time. Like a woman I just interviewed at 7 months pregnant, they were like, you're amazing at what you do. We will hire you. 3 months maternity leave, no problem. If you need 4, let us know. Like, you're great. Like, so, yep, we'll hire you. We're happy to wait 6 because it takes 3 to 4 months anyways to hire somebody nowadays. So, so the first thing is like, understand, like if you want to be a mom who celebrates your kid at work, who wants to not hide that part of yourself, because not everyone some people want to hide it, right? But if you want to be the type of mom, like showcases her kid, looks to her left, sees, pictures on her desk, if that's the life you envision, then like understand how that feels and fully embrace it. And if the place that you're at doesn't like it, then you're not actually at the right place. You're out of alignment anyways. You're all like, now you know it. Now you know that you're out of alignment. And then we get to go as long as, finances allow to move over the space. But even if you're not in a position to leave quite yet, like if you start to understand that this is how I want to feel, this is how I want to be, this is what I want to do, this is like how I want to show up, you will start to attract that piece into your life. And so for me, that's the big thing is like, how do you want to feel about your pregnancy? How do you want to feel about being a mom who works? How do you want to feel about going to your kid's game on a Tuesday? How do you want to feel? Like, what does that look like? Like, how do you want to create that? Then get super secure on that. What you're thinking isn't wrong. In fact, it's right because it's your effing life. And then start to live it. And if you start to feel pushback from your employer, that's cue, not that you're wrong, that they're wrong. Because they're wrong, not you.
I love it. And it's so bittersweet. Like when you asked that question, I was just like, oh, it was like, right in all the feels. How do you want to feel about your pregnancy? Well, obviously it's a mixed bag of feelings, especially if you've been through things like miscarriage. But once things are, relatively clear and you're ready to start telling, yes, no, I don't want to feel guilty or bad or ashamed about the fact that I'm creating a life. Like, I want to celebrate that. And you're right. Like we have been, the bittersweet aspect of it is that I know we've all been conditioned to hold that as a concern. But I'll tell you all that are listening right now, I interviewed at 8 months pregnant. I also got laid off at 8 months pregnant, by the way, but I started interviewing right away anyways, and got job offers while I was pregnant. And again, you're so right, Erica. When you celebrate the things that are you, that make you whole, that are important, the right kind of people will either come to you or you will weed out and find the folks that are going to celebrate right along with you and work along with you. And I think too, with the, the remoteness of our work and everything, thanks to COVID, there's more opportunity out there and more flexibility than ever. And so it's funny because moms and women and female talent in general are such a commodity. Companies cannot keep them. They can't hire them as fast as they're losing them. So if any of you all are in a position of leadership and are listening to this, Erica, I was curious, what would your advice be to the ways in which companies and leaders could do a better job of attracting and retaining talented moms so that they can be, what you call it, more family forward?
My immediate answer, I know I've said it like 6 times, but I'm going to say it again, is first do the internal work. So oftentimes what happens with leaders is they're like, this is what's happening. Let's go add on more programming. Let's go get women empowered. Let's do women leadership trainings. Let's do all this stuff. Yeah, right. And it's nice thought. It's a nice thought. The issue is, as women, particularly as moms, we're always asked to do more.
Yep.
I want to do less, and I want to do less well. And so what I would say is so to not add more to the plate, because again, like women in leadership, I get it. And can it just be leadership? Like, can't we just have leaders? But this is what I'm saying. This is where I'm going with it, is like, check your bias, check your own bias, and spend time collecting data. It can be anecdotal. In an ideal world, it is actually with a third party or, No, in an ideal world, it's a third party because they're going to know what to look like. But if nothing else, start to check your own bias and then start to, once you understand what your bias is, start to go look for it in the company. Just keep your eyes open because I'm telling you right now, you don't have to look hard. Like
Right.
once you see where your bias is, it will start to pop up everywhere because of what, because what I said, like all businesses are made for men unless they have been gender neutralized. And most businesses have not. And so see that, understand it, grab the data, and then create the plan because everyone tries to make the plan before doing their own internal work and surveying what's actually happening because
Right.
we don't like your company's unique issues. While we can probably all agree that there's like 3 or 4 things that are always going to be the same, how you advocate for them, how they're righted, who's in charge, like who's the champion to move it forward, all that is going to be though unique to your organization. And so yeah, if you're a leader, check your own bias because you have it. Like you just do, like you're human. That's not a knock on you. Like
Right.
check it. And then when you do, like go do the data. And the one thing I do want to add too, because I'm seeing, I think primarily most women on here are either white or white passing, is make sure not just to look at like white women, because it gets like when you dig into women of color or LGBTQ or so like all that, it is, man, it's going to hurt your heart is what it's going to do. But it's important work because you are then able to tell, I believe, a better story. And I think what ends up happening at organizations is that we use so much data that we forget that what actually sells is story. So you want to take that data, create story for all of the moms, all of the women, and all of the parents, and then move it forward. So that's where I would say individual, collect the data, make sure that you segment it into different groups. And then, and it sounds hard. Like you just got to use your eyeballs. Like, I mean, really, once you know your bias,
right. Your eyes and your ears, active listening, giving space to all of those.
Right.
Is so paramount, and absolutely listening in and checking your own bias. I think it's also pushed a button whenever I think about companies, one of the things that does just infuriate me is that if you have a small group within a company, which this is happening a lot, where it's women or LGBTQ or women of color, they create what they call those employee resource groups. And running those employee resource groups, the people who need the resources, who's spending their time outside of their regular job doing more work and not getting paid for it, the people who need the resources. And so yes, 100%, when it comes to like leadership and companies, like the work is on you. We talk about it in the sense of allyship for people of color, but I don't think we talk about it much in the way of how we show up and support women in the workplace. We just are like, you know what, that's like emotional work, that's extra stuff that women are dealing with. You're going to have to go figure that out for yourself. We'll give you some budget and we'll expect, to give us the ROI on what this is producing for us. I mean, I could have a whole nother podcast discussion on those things. I appreciate them and I applaud the people who work for them, but it just drives me absolutely nuts that it's work that needs to be done from the top down. And if it's work, it needs to be paid for.
I mean, that's the thing is like this is why I hate the low hanging fruit of like, we just hire for diversity. Like we just hire women, we just hire more Black people, we just hire more like Asians. Like this is what we're doing. And it's like, yeah, but you're hiring them so that they fix your culture from within. That's what you're doing. You're hoping that they create an inclusive culture. No. You have to create the inclusive culture and you're allowed to ask for their opinion. And if they want to give it, they can. And, in those groups, you have those women and people who want to advocate, but like, you're not really giving them dollars. You're not really giving them power. What you're doing is you're appeasing. Like if you really cared, like you said, you would pay them, you would do these different things. Like, and I've seen groups do that. Like I've seen companies, I've been part of companies that are doing that. And it continues to like, to your point, like it hits a button. Cause I'm like, you want me to fix this culture. And and as a woman, when we think about how little we make, part of the reason why we make so much little, like we make less than men is because you put us on tasks that don't move our jobs forward. Like you're like, oh, Erica will want to do the party planning. Oh, Erica will want to be on this resource group. Oh, she can do. And it's like, is this advancing my job? And then if I say no, because it's not, then you judge me because like she should have been nice or she should want this. It's like, again, it's this perpetuating cycle. And it's so infuriating. And I think I know we can do a better job, but to your point, it starts with leadership. And I really believe, and managers. And I think it involves money going into unconscious bias and social emotional training instead of like $30,000 from another speaker. Like,
right. Oh, 100%. Oh my goodness. We're coming close to time already. It's gone so fast. This has been so good, Erica. We did have a couple questions that came through. Emma was asking, she was curious, do women lose more income with the more children that they have?
They sure do. They sure do. It's unfortunate, but they definitely they make less with more kids, and then the bias gets even stronger and stronger and stronger against moms when that happens, and it's so unfortunate. But like I said, I stay optimistic because I see employers who are like, oh cool. Like there are employees out there that celebrate it and that get it and that understand that when dads have multiple kids, like they do just fine. Like,
right.
They do just fine.
Well, it just all balances itself out then, right? Oh, wait, not always a situation. And I liked how Julie, she didn't have a question, but she added, I call that the perceptionist. I've never thought about that. When you have women within the company trying to fix the culture, I was guilty of that. I called it that. I was like, it's a brick wall and I just keep running up against it, slam my head up against it, passing up opportunities with other companies, moving up from within, all because I'm like, I have to fix this. I want this to be a space that feels good for everyone, and that's a lot of emotional labor that we do.
And I think that we have to recognize, and I would just say we have to recognize when we're doing that and like be okay not doing it. Like I think the one thing that, we're always talking about leaning in. I'm like, man, there's a time for you to lean out. Like
there is.
Like there's a time for you to opt out. And now in 2022, we have such leverage. So use it.
Absolutely. And it's so funny you brought that back up. I said yes. I have yes to less written on my little whiteboard right here because I am just as guilty as anybody else of just wanting to do, to be, to help, to support. And then I overshow for everyone else. And then I'm like nothing left. So I think that's great piece of advice. Do we have any other questions for Erica?
And I want to just add, as you're saying, is like someone said this to me recently, and I think it's such an important analogy, is like, what are the rubber and what are the crystal balls? Like that's the thing that moms get penalized for dropping the rubber balls, not the crystal. They're like, well, you should just keep all balls in the air. You should be juggling all of it. And it's like, no, employer, what are the crystal ones? Yeah. You you tell me and I will not drop those. But like the rubber balls, they were rubber the entire time. They were never needed. You just liked it because you liked how hard I worked, but they were never the most important, which is why like often when we do a lot of the work, like that project sits for months because we were just given this to-do list versus saying, this is the most important. This is what moves the needle forward. And as a mom, that to me has really resonated. What are the crystal balls? Because that's what I'm going to focus my efforts on.
I love that advice.
Yeah. And if I have if I have time for the rubber ball, I'll juggle it. But like, I don't need to impress anybody. Like, I think what this woman said, she said, the thing about a rubber ball is if we drop it, it bounces back. And I was like, that's deep. So I'm stealing it and sharing it with you.
It's a great metaphor. It's a great metaphor. And then also too, I would add on to that, the fact that if you don't respect your time, nobody else will. And I think there's no better time than parenthood to start to draw some solid boundaries, for yourself, for the life that you want to lead, for the career you want to lead. And sometimes doing is not leading. Doing all the things is not the thing. Finishing that to-do list is not always going to be the thing that gets you promoted.
Yeah.
We have a quick question. We've got a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to it. Sarah's asking, what advice do you give to an incoming strong female 23-year-old leaders on balancing work and finding the right partner to support success?
So what advice would you give to a strong 23-year-old who wants to be a leader on balancing? Is that or 23-year-old leaders? Okay. I sound like a broken record. Get right, girl. Like help them get, if you're the 23-year-old, get right. If you're if you're helping support the 23-year-old, help them really understand what is truly valuable for them, what they want. Like we don't have to, and not like, I would like a job where I work from 10 to 4 and my partner is 6'4" with like olive skin and has this job. No, like what type of life I want a life with flexibility. I want a man who supports me, and support looks like XYZ. And I think it's getting really clear on that, because so many times as humans, when we want love, when we want success, we're really easily able to say, "Mm, like, well, he doesn't have that thing. Like, he's not supportive in that way, but he has this, and he could change, and that could manipulate it, and this company could do this." And it's like, pause. What do you want? What is
Mhm.
that like? What does that look like? Not the physical or like the how. It's like, what do you want? Not how will you get it? What do you want? And then what do those things feel like in your body when you get them? Because like my background is in health, a health coach for a really long time. And like your body will tell you whether or not it's right or wrong. We often don't listen because we're like, if I just push through, if I just push through, if I just push through, I'm like, get right with what you want, get really clear. And when someone doesn't deliver or a company doesn't deliver, don't think it's like, don't default to it being you. Default to curiosity. Is it me or is it them? What do I need to like write within myself in order to get there? And if you're like, nah, I'm doing it, then leave, because you're 23 and you might
Right.
be 24 or 25. Like,
Mhm.
you have like all the time in the world to be broke and like learning and like switching. And so I guess like for me, it's that piece is like, understand what it looks like, because you have the potential to change leadership by changing yourself. Because I always say like the individuals change the collective, and we don't need every individual to change in order for the collective to change. It's those handful of courageous, strong, willing folks who are saying, I will do it differently, and then pave the way by showing us that it can be different. But that means that like the advice I got at 22 or 23 was like, in the game of office politics, learn to play ball. That has ruined my career. Don't learn
Right.
how to play ball.
Please.
Like, yeah, say fuck it. Like, I'm going to do me, and like it's going to work out, because so many places exist for you to do you. And if they don't, you start your own company and other people will be able to benefit from you. And I see that happen in so many conversations, like women just being like, screw it, doesn't exist,
Yep.
I'm going to do it. And the amount of families and communities they touch by trusting themselves is, I mean,
It's a beautiful thing.
yeah,
Well, that's
it's
the difference
yeah.
between falling in love with who you are versus what you do.
Mm-hmm.
If I could go back to 23-year-old me, I would be like, don't like question your ambition, what it is that you truly want out of life. And it sounds morbid, but literally think about on your deathbed, you're looking back at your life. What are you going to think was worthwhile for living for? Was it your title and your salary? Hell no. But you can work and live a really robust, beautiful, impactful, meaningful life. And it might not fall within a certain salary range or title. And I can tell you that from just existing for 41 years and still lots to learn. But that whole idea of fall in love with who you are and not what you do is not my term. It was out of Bittersweet. We just finished reading it for Together Digital Book Club by Susan Cain. If any of you have not read it yet, so good, so good. Talking about the duality and how longing and sorrow are actually parts of what make us whole. So you've given us so much great stuff to think about, Erica, so much good advice. I'm sad that we're already out of time. We're slightly like over time. If any of you have any questions for Erica and you happen to be members of Together Digital, you can find her in Slack. Also, LinkedIn. Is that okay if they reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Wonderful. Any imparting last advice that you want to give to the folks that are listening today?
I, the only thing that comes through is like, it sounds so corny, but you can be the change you want. Like, it is your life. Live it, because everyone's gonna have an opinion, and the only opinion that really matters is you and like the handful of people that surround you. And so my hope is, particularly for moms, is like, recognize like you created a miracle. Like, that means you are the miracle, which means that you can create also other life and other things that you want. And so for me, that just continues to be something that I walk through on a regular basis, is like, hey man, like, this is my life, this is my world, and I'm going to create it for me.
I love it. Well, you're leaving a good road for your kiddos as well. So awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Erica. I hope you all got something good out of today's conversations. Members, if you're here with us and you haven't checked out our moms group, we do have a working moms peer group that meets first Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. Eastern. So hopefully you join us again next week. We are going to be doing a power lounge all about the lost art of connection. It's a fantastic book that you can check out, or you could just come and listen to Susan impart all of her wisdom and knowledge and maybe get a little bit of cliff notes, but the book is also worth checking out. So Julie dropped the link up to the upcoming power lounges. Erica, thanks for joining us. It was wonderful to have you here.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a good weekend.